It's December 11th, 1992, and another remarkable event is about to be uncovered by Arion, Rebecca, and Olly, the Retrospectors.
When does Christmas begin in your household? Is it the day you get the decorations down from the attic, the afternoon you mull some wine, the morning you first tackle a chocolate orange for breakfast? Well, for me, it is always the night we watch The Muppet Christmas Carol. Released today in history in 1992, the best Muppet movie, the best adaptation of A Christmas Carol, and the best Christmas movie, and I will not hear anything to the contrary.
Going into this completely blind, I have to say it is a very, very good adaptation of A Christmas Carol. And I think we'll get into it, but that's sort of what makes it work, is that the original vision was that it would be a pastiche of Dickens, but in the end they decided to make it more like a loving homage. And I don't think we'd all be watching it every year now if it was just a piss take of Dickens.
This film was released in 92, and the Muppets at this stage were in this real sort of developmental period. The 1980s had seen the highs of like the Muppet movie and the Great Muppet Caper and Muppets Take Manhattan and Fraggle Rock. But then that same decade also ended with the sudden death of Jim Henson in 1990, which was a massive loss for the company and sort of set the Muppets a little bit into the wilderness. And in any case, in the 1990s, you had the cinematic landscape kind of shifting towards these big budget spectacles, animated films like Beauty and the Beast and high concept Christmas films like Home Alone. And so into this, the Muppets were trying to both reintroduce themselves, but also find a way to move the whole franchise forward under the direction now of Jim Henson's son, Brian Henson, who was making both a tribute to his father, but also this massive test of the franchise's future.
I do feel that the inherent darkness in any kind of Victorian Dickensian tale is really brought out by the people behind the Muppets in this era because there's so much darkness behind the scenes. You know, you've got the film directed, as you say, by Brian Henson after his father has suddenly died at the age of 53. This guy who'd created all the characters, done the voice and the actions of Kermit for that entire time, and basically everyone else who's a Muppeteer is a mate of his. And as if that wasn't kind of stressful enough, behind the scenes, after Jim Henson died, Disney were threatening to pull out of the deal to buy the Jim Henson Company, basically arguing that without its most senior creative force, the whole enterprise was worth less than when they'd negotiated to buy it, which of course makes perfect sense in Hollywood contractual terms, but when you're talking about your dad's estate, must have been very traumatic. And then the composer, Paul Williams, who wrote these amazing songs in this film that are quite subtle. They're not bangers. Like, they work, and then 20 years later, they're still in your head because they're beautiful. He was emerging from rehab after a decade of alcohol and cocaine abuse.
Yeah, and trying to hold all of this together is Brian Henson, who's only 28 years old. He was a puppeteer by trade, and Muppet Christmas Carol will be his first time directing a movie. So there was a lot on his plate, and he was already thinking about doing a literary adaptation for the next Muppet movie, precisely because he was looking for source material that would be strong enough to move the franchise past his father's death. You know, this couldn't be something throwaway because it would elicit inevitable comparisons with the past Muppet movies. But the idea to adapt Christmas Carol specifically came from Bill Haber, who was the co-founder of Creative Artists Agency, and he was producer on a couple of Muppets projects. He pitched it to Henson and then announced that he had already sold the idea to ABC as a TV special. But Disney then stepped in and offered to produce it as a theatrical release instead. And suddenly, you know, Brian Henson's directorial debut is Disney's Christmas movie for 1992.
Yeah, and that meant that they could really up their ambitions. They used really detailed Victorian sets and huge sound stages, this real sort of theatrical storybook quality. You had the narrow London alleyways and glowing windows and snowy cobblestone streets and so on, with the support of all these old favourite veteran puppeteers, Frank Oz, Steve Whitmire, Dave Goelz and Jerry Nelson. They were all back to contribute to this thing. So they had the pedigree of everyone except Jim Henson and these new puppetry techniques that included full-body costumes and scaled sets and carefully coordinated animatronics. So they were were able to really not only try to breathe life into what was the Muppets, but try to imagine what the Muppets could be in the future. Whitmire is interesting. He said that on the eve of filming the first scene as Kermit, because he was taking over the role of Kermit, he had a dream of encountering Jim Henson himself, and he admitted to how nervous he felt about stepping into this role that was so associated with Henson. And he said, quote, "He stopped and there was this thoughtful gesture Jim would do when he would take both of his index fingers and put them under his chin. And he did that and he thought and he said, 'It will pass.'" And Whitmire was like, well, that's all I need to know.
There's also, of course, the casting of Michael Caine as Scrooge. As Kermit once said in an interview, the movie has a mix of humans and Muppets in it, and some of the humans are very realistic. And Michael Caine as Scrooge is convincing, committed, completely irony-free, and plays it like he would if he was doing an absolutely faithful textbook edition of A Christmas Carol. There is no winking at the camera. There is none of that self-congratulatory vibe that you get when celebrities appear on The Muppet Show and it's like, I'm doing this for the grandkids. When he was offered the role, he reportedly told Brian Henson, quote, "I'm going to play it like I'm playing opposite the Royal Shakespeare Company." And honestly, I think his performance meets those ambitions. You watch his face cycle from joy to apprehension to dejection to fear. He never betrays any awareness that his co-narrator is a rat from New Jersey, or that Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem Band don't really belong in Victorian London. You utterly believe that he has been on a gut-wrenching journey to confront his own mortality.
Yeah, that was a genius decision. I mean, Whitmire, who by this point had witnessed many celebrity interactions with the Muppets, said if an actor tries to compete with the silliness and upstage the Muppets, it doesn't work. And this is a case where, it really did work, and it matched the tone that they were already trying to strike anyway. The script was written by Jerry Juhl, who was the head writer on The Muppet Show. But the initial idea had been for this parody of Dickens. Miss Piggy was going to be the sort of gluttonous ghost of Christmas present, etc. But reading the source material to develop the script made them appreciate how beautiful Dickens's prose was. And so they started thinking maybe they would do something that would try to actually capture the feeling of the original. And the final product definitely does that. As you were saying, Arion, the sets are so detailed and it has a lot more direct quotations from the novella than most adaptations do. And I think you would get bored, especially, the parents watching, would get bored if it was just a silly takeoff. That's not going to sustain a whole film and make you want to watch it every year. It is the way that it captures the feeling of the novella that keeps people coming back, for generations.
Yeah, although when it came out, it entered a really competitive holiday market, and despite generally positive reviews, particularly praising the sincerity of the performances, it earned far less than many of the blockbusters of the season. So it really kind of spluttered out without the clarity that it was going to enter the canon of the great Christmas films until it was released on home video and cable broadcast and all of that. And it found its audience through the re-watching. And I think that's the experience that has made it part of everyone's lives is not the sort of first cinematic release, but more the coming back to it year after year with their family.
And I think because the popularity of Muppet Christmas Carol has so shaped our perception of the Muppets, that it's difficult to imagine that at the time they were seen as being, these very, not transgressive in a serious way, but sort of comedically transgressive troupe of puppets who would sort of throw celebrities off their game and wreak a bit of havoc, a bit like an American version of Mr. Blobby, dare I say. And so for some critics watching this in 1992, they felt, oh no, they're turning them into basically sort of children's characters who are quite sentimental and sweet, that they'd sort of lost their edge. And Variety called it not as enchanting or amusing as the previous entries in the Muppet series. And that was reflected in the box office too, because they were competing not only with Disney's other big release of the time, Aladdin, which had opened a month earlier. And that
is a great movie too, to be fair.
It's a great movie, and it was, even though it's not Christmassy, it was still pulling in the crowds a month after its release into
December.
December.
You know what, though? Robin Williams as the genie is much more postmodern, isn't he, than all of the sort of jokes to camera in a Muppet Christmas Carol. And that was right for 1992, but when you watch it now, it's dated.
Yeah,
Whereas actually
absolutely.
the Muppet Christmas Carol hasn't at all. Like Aladdin now feels like, what's that? I had to explain to my kids, like, oh, he's doing Oprah Winfrey. It's difficult.
Daddy, who's Bob Hope?
Yeah, exactly.
But the major thing they were competing with was Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, and they did not come anywhere near to winning that battle. Muppet Christmas Carol made $27 million in North America. Home Alone 2 made $173 million.
But don't you think that the main thing they were competing with was the great body of work that had come before this moment? And in a sense, this was kind of a tribute to all of that. There's a moment in One More Sleep Till Christmas where Kermit gazes up into the night sky just as a shooting star flashes overhead. And in the DVD commentary, God, remember DVD commentary? Like that was a selling point for like buying things again. Anyway, Brian Henson said that this was a deliberate echo of the Muppet movie where a similar star goes over Kermit's head. And since then, the image of Kermit framed under a shooting star has become this kind of motif.
Yeah, but they made the right decision about those ghosts not being Muppets. You know, you're talking about Miss Piggy being the ghost of Christmas Present, not doing that, in a way that at the time felt like the wrong decision. So you're watching at the time thinking, oh, this would be so much... They were going to have Gonzo as the ghost of Christmas Future with his blue nose sticking out from under the Reaper's hood. And of course that would be less scary. But watching it now, the absence of that pantomime quality... You know, they're slightly... Like, one of them's not even a particularly good puppet. It's a bit weird. It's a bit like sort of artsy theatre puppet, you know? It's not like a Muppet at all.
Is it the one that was filmed underwater that's got sort of flowing...
Yes, sort of ethereal and odd.
To it?
Yeah. It all just feels a bit like take your medicine rather than something fun.
Yeah.
And yet... It's that unfamiliarity, seeing these puppets that don't appear elsewhere in the Muppet canon, that make those scenes feel... more urgent. They make Scrooge's crisis feel more acute because you're experiencing it like him, being like, what the hell is that?
No, and it gives it kind of light and shade for the Muppets to react to. It means that you've got this serious performance at the heart of it from Caine, but then also anytime a Muppet comes on screen, they are suddenly elevated in their in their hilarity because they're responding to something that was quite serious before.
I do quite like Rebecca's idea of a blobby Christmas Carol, though. It's a shame. It's a shame that didn't happen. I don't think it would hit me in the heart, in the feels, in quite the same way.
He'd just be going into the Cratchit's house and just upending the Christmas dinner.
Just throwing the turkey against the wall. Yeah.
Tiny Tim crying.
Tomorrow.
There was also a bit of a bout of Magdalene mania going around at the time.
Surely that's just Christianity.
Ditch the ads and get a Sunday episode when you join Club Retrospectors. Patreon.com/retrospectors.